Oxford from the inside. The good, the bad, but always the truth.
Hey, welcome to Oxford from the Inside, the good, the bad, but always the truth. Today we're here with Alice. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Alice. I study law at Trinity College, Oxford, and I'm going into my second year.
Nice. And today we're going to be talking about how to write a personal statement for law. Alice, before we get onto the law side, what general advice do you have for writing a personal statement?
So the advice that I was given is pretty general anyway, as I come from a school where no one had applied to an Oxbridge degree before, and they approached it the exact same way that they approached a job application, which I think is always pretty helpful advice because an application at the end of the day is an application. And it was very fun and easy 3-point message that stuck in my head that they used to say, which was, what do you want to do? Why do you want to do it? And what progress have you made so far in, achieving that goal? And that's how I structured my personal statement before I'd even added any of the, the details about the law. What is the thing that I want to do, which is my degree? Why do I want to do it? And what had I done about it to prove that I wanted to do it? So I'd say they're good things to reflect on when you're both choosing your degree and approaching the personal statement.
Nice. Yeah, I've never actually heard that approach before, but it is aligned with a lot of other advice that I've heard in terms of going about your personal statement, but in terms of like going about it the same as a job application is new to me. But it does, yeah. Now I can see how they're both like satisfy each other. Um, what ways have you seen, or like can you think of how someone would exemplify or like prove almost that they've gone out their way to show that they want to study law. So that third point you're making, what like can you think of any examples of like what prospective law students could do, or prospective students in general first?
I think it should very much build on the second point that I referred to, which is, why do you want to do this degree? And applicable for any degree, you should, especially if you're applying to Oxbridge, you should have a good understanding as to why you want to study that subject. Um, so it could be anything. For myself, I have a lot of personal connection with the law, which is what made me become interested. And then in my personal statement, I detailed, how I'd further explored the law, which was for me was through work experience. I wrote to a lot of local companies and went to the local court and things like that, and found that, I was interested. And although I'd not really had an exposure to law in my education before, it was something that I wanted to do. Anyone who's studied perhaps law at A level, that is definitely something you could use to show. Yeah, I've been thinking about this for a while. I am definitely invested in this idea of the degree, and perhaps if it's a new idea, you can even find things online. It's very easy to find. So podcasts or even the law section of different newspapers like the Guardian or the BBC are completely free to read, and all you have to do is pick out a story that interests you, discuss why it interests you in your personal statement, perhaps a comment that might come to mind if you agree with the argument in the article, why you think that that's always a very easy thing to do, and also good to just reaffirm with yourself, you're investing a lot of time into your degree, so make sure there is definitely a few reasons that you can spell out on paper that you want to do it, as to why you want to do it.
Nice. I just wanted to add on to that in terms of like reading materials. I don't know if you know about those like very short introduction series. So there's like these small books by the Oxford University Press publisher, and they all have like a very short introduction to different topics. And in terms of law, I know there's one on law, philosophy of law, and loads of like different types of law that are quite a bit. I think anyone read listening even just the one into law would be pretty satisfactory to give some ideas for personal statements. And the best thing about them is that they're 80 A6 pages, so very, very small pocket-sized books. But yeah, that's how all those materials sound really good.
That does sound good. Sorry, I should also add in, depending on where you're from, so I'm from a big city and our local bookshop's got a little reading section, so you can also skip the cost and just flick through when you're in there. Even just grabbing a legal textbook, you know, if you go to a library and you go through to the law section, find whatever you can, flick through, and then you can generally get a good little idea, even just from the contents page, of some things that you might want to explore further, like even just a Google search to go, okay, that sounds interesting, you know, I'll look a bit more into this, or that side really doesn't interest me, I'll go find something else. That's another useful way. But yeah, sorry to cut over you there, but I've just remembered that is something I've done. So
nice. That's really cool. It's amazing how much the blurb and contents page can give you rather than reading the whole text. So in terms of law personal statements, what advice do you have for prospective students writing a personal statement for law?
Again, I would say to just really emphasize why you're interested in the law, because the law itself is such a broad thing that it is just like many different subjects in one. So for example, in my personal statement, I spoke a lot about family law and specifically ideas to do with you know, adoption and the children's side of the law and how the law deals with looking after minors, which is something I was very interested in. Whereas I know one of my very close friends also studies law, and they were speaking about, you know, the monopoly of companies in the world and how the law regulates companies. And, you know, I was just like, I don't have a clue how that works. So really it can be, you know, anything. Just make sure it definitely reflects on, you know, why you want to study law, because that will come across, especially at Oxbridge, where, you know, in the interview they may follow up on a point or they may ask you a bit more. Yeah, I don't think there's much more that can really be added beyond just really show that, you know, this degree is for you. For legal careers especially, a lot of people start out in a different subject and then may do a conversion course to law and carry on. You need to prove, you know, that you definitely want to go into the law degree now, because if you just have a general passion, you know, what's to stop people thinking, you know, you could easily study history and then do the conversion course later on. Or if perhaps you like the law and you may show a bit more of an interest in the historical side of it, you know, again, someone could bring that up and go, well, are you truly interested in the law? It's such a broad thing. It can be both a blessing and a curse to try and prove that you're interested in. So yeah, just make sure you reflect on what has drawn you to it specifically.
Nice. I was wondering, could you expand on what, so you said there's family law, but what does that mean? Like, are there other types of law? Could you like give us a rundown in the different types?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, so practically anything that you can think of in the world, there will be a region of law that governs it. So obviously I was very interested in family law when I was growing up. I'm now less so interested, but that is the natural progression of studying law. I think you really do root out what you're interested in and what, you know, perhaps you may have a passing interest in, but are not as invested in. So yeah, in terms of legal careers, there are perhaps three main practices that people reflect on, which is family law, governing, you know, personal relationships with personal relationships, so things like marriage and adoption, children, a few other sides of it which perhaps aren't as pleasant. I know I've been lucky enough to do a bit of work experience in family law, and there's also some that covered domestic abuse, things like that. On the flip side, there's also criminal law, which is probably what most people think of when they think of the law. Pretty bog standard, you know, you commit a crime, you go to court, you hopefully get sent away if you are guilty, and everything surrounding that area. And then probably the biggest area that covers so many different aspects of life is commercial law, which regulates companies. And practically everything you can think of in terms of, the business world and law's connections with companies and clients as bodies as opposed to the individual. And that's currently the area that I'm also interested in. And under that umbrella term, you have everything from real estate, so like the selling of houses and, licensing properties, down to media law and what's called intellectual property law, which is a really fascinating area of the law, in terms of protecting an idea that you've had and copyrighting an idea and kind of trademarking things. So it literally expands everywhere you think of. Even this morning I was reading the news, and there was an article on how someone's bought their own meme and how they're going to sell that off for £500,000. And I just think that's, absolutely ridiculous and not at all what you think of when you think, oh yeah, the law, what work does the law do? Apparently it sells memes and it puts people behind bars. So
Yeah. Wow.
yeah, when I say the law's broad, I mean you can pretty much relate it to anything you can think of.
Wow, nice. Another question I had is that in terms of like commercial law, there's always like in terms of like politics and like the relationship between government and like private sector, and is it like through commercial law, if when you hear the news or news articles or in history, governments like putting restrictions on like the private sector, is that through commercial law? Is that, am I right in thinking that?
I would say so. When I'm very much career driven at the moment, and second year, I'm applying for a few jobs at the moment, and that's probably why I've brought up that example. But yeah, I would say so. Generally, anything to do with the government tends to be thought of as public law, but when they're just issuing statutes, you kind of have to look at like written law. You have to look at who that's addressing and who that will concern to kind of think, it'll be related to this area. So if they issued something relating to like children, like I said, my interest in family law, then immediately the family law lawyers would be like, right, that's something we have to get on. We have to look at that and understand that and consider this from now on. And if it was something to do with, what's one at the moment? Perhaps more generally the data protection acts, that obviously affects everybody, but more so companies when they collect information of customers and things like that. So that'll definitely be the way that it's flagged and people's attention is drawn to it. I'm not sure if that answers your question, sorry.
Yeah, it does. But yeah, it does. Especially the data protection is like a good example of what I was thinking. Before we carry on, I also had another question that I've always thought about when thinking about like the law, I guess more in terms of criminal law. Is it like, so in terms of deciding like if an action is moral or not, and it seems like quite is it, how do like laws form, and how do people decide that something's right or wrong? Do you know, like, can you, is it quite, is it like common sense, or is it that they know, is it like a law, like people who make the laws know that there's a chance that this might not be right, or etc.? Because I think, yeah, that's quite a big thing that on my mind.
Yeah, so perhaps a bit more generally to kind of break it down a bit, when the law is decided, it's generally it's a historical thing. So we work on a common law system, and God, I hope I'm getting this right. But we work on a common law system, which means we tend to look back at the previous law and then just kind of adjust it and fiddle about with it, and so it suits what we need it to do today. But to do that, you need a certain amount of authority. So the first port of call is the government, who have that authority because they are democratically elected by us. And everything is, you might have heard of everything having to pass through the Queen when a law is passed. So that is official, but very much symbolic in the sense that, yes, we need the Queen's approval, but ultimately the Queen has to do what the government says. So it is, in fact, the government, perhaps the main authority, and they'll often pass statute, which is written law, which is one of the highest forms of law that you can get. So there's different levels to forms of law. That'll then be taken on by the courts, and the courts will look into that law when they're in a case, and if there's a dispute, they'll interpret what the government has written, apply it to that case, and then in future cases, perhaps concerning a similar situation or a similar issue arises, they'll consider both the legislation and the previous judgments of cases. So it's very much a kind of reflective process. In terms of morally right and wrong, I think that a lot of the time they like to think they're doing what is morally right and wrong, but also what is morally right is not always the aim. Criminal law specifically, I did not have a good relationship with criminal law. Criminal law was not the one for me. But one area I remember being very interested in when writing my personal statement was the law around sex work and prostitution and things like that. Because on one hand, morally, you could argue, this may not be, the best thing. But then on the other hand, you could argue, this is someone's living. Should there not be regulations and law in place to ensure that they can do this in a safe and in a safe way that won't harm themselves and won't harm society as much as we can do. So that might be a little area of interest, but there's definitely, the law has always got someone creating an argument about it. There's always an issue that someone thinks is right, someone thinks it's wrong, and that's one of the things that I love about it. Literally anything that you can interpret can be taken a million different ways, and there's some very obvious ones that obviously murder's wrong. That's definitely one that was definitely built on common sense and perhaps even religion to some extent. But there are perhaps some more shady areas, such as at the moment they're discussing a freedom of speech piece of statute, which I really need to read into more than I have. But there'd be a lot of people arguing it's morally wrong to limit freedom of speech. In particular, I think this is aimed at the internet. And then there'll be a lot of people saying, well, look at the harms that online trolling and comments can cause. We need some form of law. And where you stand on that is very much a personal issue, and one of the reasons why I love studying the law.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah. Nice. And so moving a bit more back to the personal statement. Sorry for the slight adrift. But hopefully those ideas will help prospective students with thinking of what kind of things they can write in their personal statement. But should the personal statement, involve anything with why someone wants to become a lawyer, or is the law personal statement, should it be devoted to, or mostly devoted to, why they want to study law?
Yeah, so the personal statement, I would say there is a very fine distinction in saying why you want to study law, and it's very easy to kind of instead talk about your desire if you want to be a lawyer, and they're two completely different things. So definitely address your personal statement towards the idea of studying law as a degree. As a degree, it's a lot more research based. There's a lot more perhaps theory that you're going to be considering and arguments that you're going to be making, whether the law is right, whether the law is wrong. Whereas in practice, you'll very much, most of the time, just be stating the law. In terms of practice in solicitors' practices, you'll more often than not be using business skills than legal skills, or perhaps an equal weight. I probably have that a little bit wrong. And if you're in a court, then you can also argue the law's wrong, but ultimately, as I said, we're on a common law system, so you have to be reflective as to what the law actually is and what it has been, as opposed to what you think. So there is that huge distinction with the degree and with practice. Yeah, sorry, I think that's I was expecting myself to say more there, but I think that's kind of summarised
No?
it quite well.
Yeah, nice. So moving on, what was your experiences like writing your personal statement, and like what topics did you like choose, or like what material did you decide to write about, etc.
So in my personal statement, I done it little by little. I was quite organised and very strict with myself, as I'm very much a procrastinator, and this is something I thought, no, you need to get this right. But I knew I wouldn't do it in one big go. So any procrastinators out there, I highly recommend just breaking it down and doing it little by little. I would say for my experiences, it was very much kind of a self-reflective process. Again, you have to very much emphasize, why law, why this degree, and putting that down on paper was quite tricky. So yeah, definitely allocate some time that you can think about those things, and allocate some time of, expressing it in the way that you want to. And make sure to check it with as many people as you can, whether that's, your school, even to, I showed my brother. I said, what do you think of this? He's like, well, I don't have a clue about law, but I think I can tell that, you want to do it, which, removing that kind of legal side to things and the emphasis on the academics can even be helpful in its own right, just to say, does this seem like I really want to do it? Does it, like, get my point across that, this is what I want to do for the next 3 years? And I would actually recommend highly showing it to someone who perhaps doesn't have any interest in academics, or has been removed from academics for a fair while. Sorry, I think again that's another one that I've just kind of said everything more concisely than I expected.
Yeah, that's fine. Is it? I mean, the concise is always the way forward. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But in terms of you talking about work experience, if you're writing a law personal statement, should prospective students feel like they need to have done work experience?
And 100% no. So it can be helpful in some ways, and definitely, explaining your passion for law and perhaps where it might have come from. You might have done a placement somewhere with somebody, and that's why you started thinking about the law. But it's 100% not necessary. Number one, because it's notoriously difficult to get. So I was very lucky in being able to get work experience. And I know so many of my friends on the law course have never done any legal work experience. Again, I would really flag that it's important to have the desire to study the degree, and it's not necessary to want to do a legal career. As I mentioned, I think I mentioned before, a lot of people tend to do a different degree first, like history, or a lot of sciences even, and then do a conversion course for 1 year after their degree, so that they can practice in law and have a legal career. And at the same time, a lot of people who do a law degree don't end up going into a legal career. So work experience is a completely separate thing. If you want to do a legal career, work experience is brilliant. You will need it at some point, but not for the degree. If there is anyone who wants to do some work experience and perhaps is finding it tricky to get, I would say local courts is a really good thing that you can, go in, you can phone them up, find out if there's any chance that you can go sit in and watch a case. I'd done that a fair few times, and even though I wasn't very interested in criminal law, which is mostly what is dealt with in the courts in my area, it's still really good insight to be able to have and to understand, how courts work, and a few issues that were being brought up, and even managing to speak to a few barristers on occasion. Like one occasion, very luckily, I got some courage and I went and spoke to a judge in the waiting area in the foyer. So they're invaluable insights. And I would also say with everything that's going on at the moment with COVID, anyone interested in perhaps commercial law or potentially family law, there's a website called The Forage, and a lot of big legal names have put on virtual work experience on there, which is free to do, which again might be a good insight. But don't associate work experience too heavily with the degree, because as I say, they're two completely different things. And it can be good for showing, this is why law, but it's not the be all and end all, and it's certainly not what your degree is going to look like. So do think beyond.
Nice. What favorite things have you found in your law degree?
Can I say my friends? I'm friends with mostly lawyers at university, and being able to be like speaking about something that I'm really passionate about with people who are equally passionate is such an exciting new experience. But I suppose you get that with every degree. More so towards the degree though, I really like that it's so varied. So you might have got a sense before from me saying, the law's a very broad thing. It's just endless. It's honestly endless. And even as we speak, there's probably a new law that's come out in the past day or so. And I'm fairly certain that there is. And it's in the back of my head and I can't think of it, but it's always changing. There's always variety. There's always discussion and, talking about, is this working? What should we do next? And the things that you can very much see reflected in everyday life. So my favorite thing that I always do is when I get on the bus or the train and I buy a ticket and I walk away and in my head in a very nerdy way go, oh, that was a contract. Like you'd never think of it, but I've just entered into a contract. So yeah, speaking of contracts, I would say as well, I very much love how your interests may not always line up with what you enjoy in the degree. So I came into the degree very much expecting to enjoy criminal law, which I did not. And I came into the degree very much expecting to despise contract law, which is now my favourite subject that we've studied so far, and Roman law, which I should mention is very specific to the Oxford degree. And, in a very typical Oxford way, it's the history of ancient Rome and the legal system of ancient Rome. And you never really piece while studying it, why are they teaching us this? This is, dead law. This is not relevant at all. And then you sit back and you kind of reflect on everything from the past and you go, hang on a minute, that's the Scottish legal system. That's a lot of the legal systems, say in like South Africa. My tutor was from South Africa and very much she was emphasizing, these things that you learn, they can be found everywhere. So yeah, a very long-winded explanation. I really enjoy that, my degree is everywhere. Even if I'm not studying, I can find something to do with law and think on it, and kind of had that little academic debate with myself in a very nerdy way. But
No, nice. That sounds very cool.
Yeah.
Nice. That is very cool. What qualities do the university look for in in a law student, if any qualities?
So this is a question that I know law students get asked a lot and the tutors get asked a lot, and there's no real answer. So the typical qualities that you'd expect in a good student, which most students who apply to university will have them. You have to read a lot in law, more so than in other degrees. You will be reading tons and tons of things. So make sure that you enjoy reading, number one, if you want to apply for law. Or if you don't enjoy reading, make sure that you're interested in law enough to be able to do the reading. Say listening and being able to articulate your opinions is very important, and something that's very much emphasized in the law degree, being so focused on, is the law working? Should we change it? Is critical thinking. So it's well and good, reading these articles, but you need to be able to form your own opinion. Do you agree with them? Do you not agree with them? Do you have a different take? Why is that? One thing I would say is really good to kind of reflect on critical thinking is reading the news. And like I said, just go onto the BBC or the Guardian or even some more legal specific websites like the Law Gazette. It's very dry, but it helps you find things a bit quicker than your average newspaper might relate into the law. And kind of think, what interests me, pick that article and then read through and go, okay, what's it saying? What's it arguing? Do I agree with this? Why not? Or why so? Most of the time I don't agree. I'm very argumentative, so good lawyer, but not always ideal. That is the number one thing I would say, especially for Oxbridge, where you have to articulate your opinions weekly in tutorials. And speaking of tutorials, that would be the last thing I'd say on that point is, you know, they're very selective at Oxford and Cambridge for every degree, and more so than looking for, you know, a cookie cutter of a student. They're very much interested in, you know, the individual, I've found in my experiences. Because, you know, what is someone else's strength, maybe someone else's weakness, and the tutorial system makes it very easy for you to cover each other in that way. So whereas a lot of the time I will struggle with getting my ideas down on paper, and that's something I'm definitely working on. My tutorial partner is brilliant at that, and we've had many times where we've sat together and he's helped me out, I've helped him out. And it's very, it's both very nice to get to be able to work with your peers in that way, and also great because you get to utilize your strengths and work on your weaknesses. So be yourself, let your natural strengths shine through. And yeah, and even if you don't know what they are, they will come across. So
no, I think mentioning the tutorials is like a really good point as well, because I think, so if anyone who doesn't know, tutorials are when your students studying the same subject. So we'll have a classroom with their tutor, and normally it's 2-to-1 cheat, like 2 students to 1 professor teaching, or 3-to-1, 4-to-1, or 1-to-1. That tends to be around the number. And I think, as you were saying, like exactly what you're saying, tutorials really shows how there's no like cut out cookie perfect Oxford student, that people do really vary. Like I know in my tutorials, you have people who are very like extroverted and very talkative and are very engaging and very like will talk a lot of the time and happily express their ideas, and through discussion will work out where they've gone right and wrong. And you have other students who seem more seemingly perceptive, or like more quiet, but will like consume everything in the room, and then once they've had an informed opinion, will say something that tends to sort of like sum up the conversation and then like move on. And I guess the point I'm making is that you can be either or anything in between, or anything entirely, nothing like that. It all only comes down to how much you enjoy the degree in whichever means any individual goes through that. There is no like stereotypical Oxford student that will get you into Oxford. I assume you'd agree with that last.
100% agree with that. Despite everything that I thought when I was writing my personal statement, the number one thing, whatever degree, is to just, you know, be yourself, be very truthful about why you're interested, and if it's meant to be, then it'll be, and you'll fit 100% in somewhere. With, at least I found with my peers, that there's like nice little slots that we can all kind of fit into and then call on each other to help out with. And yeah, that's quite rambly, but yeah, I agree. To sum it up, I agree.
No, it's nice. Thank you, Alice. That's all that we have time for today. We've got some really interesting stuff. And thank you to the viewers for listening in, whether that's on your podcasting platform or YouTube, IGTV. We hope you guys are enjoying the autumn weather now that we're falling out of the summer, and hope you're staying safe. And we'll see you guys next time.